What's the most? But first today, mobile phones are a convenient item to have in your pocket, but along with the benefits of the technology come a few problems, especially with children. Not so long ago, the Department of Education introduced a new e-breach category for student suspensions, and these relate to breaches of student discipline involving electronic devices, internet and social media. And while the greatest number of student suspensions relate to physical aggression towards students or violating school and classroom rules, more than 2,000 students were suspended in 2016 because of inappropriate behaviour when using their mobile phone or online technology. Paul Litherland is a former police officer and regularly talks to students here in Perth about cyber safety. He's doing just that at a few schools today. Hi, Paul.
Hi, good afternoon, Jill. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. There's no doubt this issue is just getting bigger and bigger.
Yeah, it's just a continuing issue. Why? Because, our kids are on technology more and more now, so it was only just a matter of time before we were starting to see an increase in issues in the online world as we would have obviously in the past in the physical world. So it's just trying to deal with that transition at the moment. It's good to see schools sort of jumping on board this sort of education.
Schools are in a difficult position, I would imagine, Paul, because they need students to be across and comfortable with technology, but that also brings its own issues.
Yeah, and this is where it's so hard for educators in the modern world because, Jill, 10, 15 years ago, teachers would have never had to deal with this sort of stuff because it was happening at home or in the afternoons or on the weekends, whereas now so many of our kids are having issues at home online, and those matters are still being brought into the schoolyard. So as a result, the school just has to deal with those issues. So it's just a matter of trying to deal with them as best they can.
I imagine, Paul, in a lot of cases, students are more across technology than the teachers.
Oh, of course, yeah. And especially, there's a lot of good young teachers out there at the moment, but there's still a number of teachers through a lot of our systems, whether it's public education or private, who are not struggling to deal with the increase of technology, but it's just such a difficult world to keep up with. And this is where I think, again, it's trying to make that transition is quite difficult.
So, Paul, what sort of problems are you aware of that are happening in schools around these kind of cyber issues?
Oh, wow. That changes, Jill, from so many different age demographics right up to even certain areas within Perth and Australia. But the main issues we are dealing with from a broad sense at school is the inappropriate use of devices and bullying. So with the inappropriate use, you're sort of looking at anywhere between just sending inappropriate messages or even just taking photos at school when they're not supposed to be using them, right up to the nudes culture or the sexting culture. And then bullying, again, is, of course, where kids may be online at home getting picked on in an evening. All of a sudden, the next day they'll come to school and they're still having to deal with that in the schoolyard. So they're the two main issues we are dealing with. And the biggest stuff I deal with is so much in regards to just kids and teens in particular not being aware of the networks they're using and how vulnerable they can be.
Paul Litherland, former police officer and regularly talks to Perth school students about cyber safety, our guest on ABC Radio Perth, and we're talking about this new e-breach category for suspending school students who cross the line when it comes to use of computers, mobile phones or online stuff. So is it important there is a separate category, do you think, for the Education Department to deal with these sort of breaches?
Yeah, I think it is because it just gives an opportunity to address issues specifically. If a teacher or a group of teachers who might be dealing with that particular incident or portfolio as such have a range of issues that are not related to the online world as well, it's a lot to deal with, whereas at least if you can break it down to, okay, you might have a group of teachers who might deal specifically with e-breaches, then that's going to give them a lot more time and availability to work solely within that area. So I think it's been a while coming, but it's great to see the Education Department sort of jump on because it has to be treated separately, because this is just not I believe it's not just another schoolyard issue. It's so much more than that.
Do you think, Paul, I mean, how young in your experience are kids online when it comes to these sort of issues at school?
Oh, wow. I mean, I've been presenting for 6 years now, Jill, and in the last 3 years I've been presenting to primary schools because I've identified that kids are getting on younger and younger. So as a quick example, I mean, when I first started presenting, you'd probably have anywhere between 50 to 20% of Year 5 and 6 students using one or more of the top 10 social networking apps. Now you're pushing up anywhere between 80 to 90%. So that's remarkable. So many more of our kids now, anywhere between 45 to 60%, will have their own smartphone. All of them pretty much have an iPad, so their availability to be exposed to the online world is massively increased over the last 3 or 4 years. So they are getting on younger and younger, and so there's so much earlier that need for education.
Do you think that kids really understand the impact of their social media use? I mean, I'm thinking of some of the dreadful schoolyard fights we've seen posted online, and they go all over the world. It's shocking. But do you think they really understand how that might work?
I think they understand how it all works and the interactive side of things. What I know they don't understand or really look at is how that can impact on their private lives or their personal lives. So, and the line I use regularly at a presentation is so many of our kids just don't treat the online world with the same level of respect they do their real world. And it sounds so simplistic, but that's really what it is. I mean, by making a comment in a schoolyard, it's unlikely a teacher will hear it. The kids might make a bit of fun of it, but that's where it does stay. So many of our kids are still assuming the online world is the same result, but that's just not the case anymore. So again, it's just so much about just giving that education just to understand risk and how they can be seen, how it can impact on their personal lives. So and I think I have good success at the moment in doing that.
Which is good news. Paul, do you have any, I mean, for parents out there listening or teachers, do you have any advice when it comes to, trying to avoid it getting to the point where a suspension might be, on the table?
Wow. So much of what it comes back to, Jill, is just about conversations. And I know that sounds quite defeatist in regards to what I do in the cyber world, but so many parents would come to a presentation or thinking that I'm going to fix the internet for them, but in reality, so much of what we come down to is just about conversations and moderation within the home, turning devices off at night, not allowing devices in a bedroom, but just having conversations with kids in regards to why we're doing that. It's not because we don't trust, it's just because we want to give you a bit of a break and understand the privilege of having a device and all that sort of stuff. So it's just so much of it's just based on conversation.
Thank you very much for giving us some time, Paul.
No worries at all. All the very best to you and your listeners.